Instead of making the ship faster, how about installing some seatbelts?
Seatbelts are dead weight. I feel the need for speed.
Yes, but I feel the nafety for safety.
Oh, fuff.
Still working through all of the electrical and wiring for the lighting upgrades, the switch panel, and the TJ. One of the things that we're doing is we're leveraging some, just a whole lot of terminal connections, and it's always kind of the same process with them. This particular ones are for a weather-tight connector that leverages a seal at the base of the connector along with the terminal. So with these, when you're putting them together, really works best if before you strip the wire, you slide the seal onto the wire and then go through the process of crimping them up. This whole pack is a set of grounds. And so they come together, it's all just a bunch of black wires. It really won't matter which of these goes to which device. So we brought them all together to a single ground point to attach to the chassis of the vehicle, and then working through crimping the terminal for the connector onto each one of them. Slightly different seals used with the bigger wires. Same idea, but just a little bit bigger seal to accommodate the larger diameter wire when it goes into the connector housing. So the way this process works, start by taking your wire, sliding the seal onto it. And I'm finding, because these are fairly small wires here, they're only going to be 10 amp circuits. I'm having the best luck if I strip it back a little ways further than I normally would for a connector, and then fold the end of the wire over. I know this is not ideal for a lot of reasons, but that gives me just a little bit more meat for the terminal when it connects in. So then we want to bring the seal basically right up to almost right at the edge of the insulation on the wire. And you'll note that there's a little bit of a lip here. So you want to make sure that if there's any extra wire that it goes under that lip. So locate it into the connector. And again, I'm having the best luck if I kind of start to fold these little ears over. Again, shouldn't be necessary, but I'm having just a little bit better results. Make sure you've got your crimper oriented the right direction. And crimp it down. Give it a good solid squeeze. And then check with every wire to make sure you've got a good solid connection. And then we need to crimp the seal here as well. Again, make sure your crimper is in the correct orientation to close the ears around the seal. This is why people don't like doing electrical, is because this is a lot of sort of detail, lather, rinse, repeat kind of conversation. Now, what we have done with our box here is we've gone through, and as we've populated things, we've put the fuses in place so we know that they're connected, they're ready to go. And then we've got all this red is the power lines that will feed the accessory going from a fuse over to the relay. And then we have all of these wires that are going to go out to the accessories coming from the outside of the relay and ultimately out to our plugs. And the reason we're putting a plug on all of these at about a foot or so from the box is it'll make it much easier if we ever have to take the box out to work on it, because we can just detach all the plugs, unplug it, and go about it. We will do the same thing with the trigger wires for the relays as well. that'll come out into we've got a nice 16-way connector. That'll all come out into one big connector that we can disconnect and put together. And it's going to be more of the same process of just plugging all the wires into the box and then adding the terminals and eventually plugging all of them into the connector. So just lather, rinse, repeat. Keep doing it for every wire in the bundle. This is very definitely a get the right tool kind of conversation. This tool is moderately the right tool. There are better ones available. There are some that will do both the seal and the terminal at the same time. I do kind of like crimping the seal and the terminal separately because it gives you a chance to double check that crimp before you've also captured the seal. Now you note I've got some lighter wires and some heavier wires in here, and kind of see the difference in the size. These are for our high draw accessories. These are going to be for LED lights that, according to spec, the individual lights only draw about 4.5 amps a piece. So we can use lighter wiring that is a little bit easier to work with for those accessories. I am making a point when I put these terminals on to think about how that wire was folded so that we maximize the contact with the portion of the wire that isn't part of the fold, as that is actually the wire that we want to have be carrying current. So paying attention to how that's been folded so that the wire comes in at the top, fold, or on the bottom, folds and comes back on the top. Okay. And just keep doing it until you run out of wires. Once you've got your terminals crimped, the next thing you want to do is actually put the connector on. Now, again, order of assembly is really important here because you have the connector body that this goes into, the terminal with its seal, and then you have a cable retainer that goes in the back. So they have to go together in the right order or things aren't going to work. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're putting your pins in the correct place. Now for my application, or this application, what I want to be able to do is if I have an accessory that's not working, or I've got a relay that's gone bad, or a fuse that's gone bad, or something's gone wrong inside the box, I want to be able to move my accessories to a different lead. So if I'm in a situation where, you know, say I'm back on an easy trail, but it's after dark and my lights have gone out, but maybe I don't need my lockers. I can swap the connectors around and use the locker circuit to drive the lights, or use, or maybe my lockers relay has gone out. I want to be able to drive something else. Now some of these are not going to work so well with that. I've got compressors as part of this, heavy loads. Obviously don't want to move a heavy load to a lighter load circuit. But this whole idea of moving things around. So I want to make sure that I'm getting all of my wires in here with the correct orientation. So what I'm doing is I'm going to connect all the grounds first. That way the not ground is in the same place. And so what I look at here is making sure I've got the connector body in the same orientation. And then I know that this wants to go in with the latching tab down into the cavity, and just keep pushing it in until it clicks. And then I'm going to do that exactly that way and double check my work as I go for every wire in every body. That way I make sure I get all the bodies in the same orientation, because you can see, upside down versus not. Every body in the same orientation, so that these will all be electrically interchangeable. Now, some will ask, how do I know what goes to what when this is all said and done? And then I've done this, where I've gone through and made sure that my color codes are written down. And I also, when I'm laying out my box, made a printout of what the box was and went through and labeled what every fuse and what every relay was going to control, so that we can keep track of the way this is all supposed to work and double check and double check and double check as we go. It is important with these boxes to plan ahead for what you want to do, because it's really no fun to have to take them apart later with a pick tool to make sure that everything ends up where you want it to be. You can release all the terminals in the box. You can release the terminals from these connectors with the proper pick, but it is not particularly fun. So better to try to get it right the first time, not have to take it apart and do it again. Okay, so now I've got all of my grounds connected to my bodies. And again, now that I've got the grounds in there, I know that these are all the same, and I can physically verify that they are all the same. And because these are only 2-pin connectors, I can't screw them up by putting the hot lead in the wrong place. So now, what I'm going to do is take my hot leads, or my accessory load leads, off the relays. And the same way, each one's a pin, it goes down, into it clicks. Then with all of that stuff connected, you now have a nice big bundle of connectors here. I am just going to temporarily tie these together with some electrical tape to make them a little easier to keep track of. Eventually I'll probably put some wire loom around this once I finish wiring up the box. It's part of why I'm trying to do this, because I don't want to have to manage running all of that through the firewall of the vehicle. So we'll have a thinner set of cables that represent the triggers going back to the switches that will come into this box under the hood, and then the box under the hood, this feeds all of the accessories from that central location. 11 wires for the triggers, 3 wires that go to the loads. In this case, inside the cockpit, we've got a load that is a stereo amplifier and 2 loads that are heated seats. And so heavy wires for those things that are going to carry significant current, and these light wires that only have a relay behind them. And so we've got current on these that is measured in milliamps, on the order of 200 milliamps on any one of these circuits. So just a very lightweight wire to run the relay is all that's necessary. And by virtue of a thinner wire, it's easier to work with in terms of routing it through the vehicle. It requires less of a hole through the firewall. The one thing when dealing with crimp connectors and these fine wires is there isn't a lot of meat for the crimp connector to get onto. So it's definitely one where you want to have a good tool and be using the proper sized ends. Otherwise things will not crimp up like they're supposed to, and you won't have good connections.
A lot of his supplies are coming from dillcity.net.
Yep, they're a supplier. You can get all of these little electronics pieces, and the special, I shouldn't say special, but OE style connectors, weather pack connectors, Metro pack connectors. This is a GT style connector that we're using for these, but they all kind of come together very similarly in terms of the use of the seal and the little connectors that snap into the plugs. Purple, 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 purple. Okay. Yellow, yellow, green, green, purple, purple. Okay. That was the high current lines. So now, we get to sit here and play this game of what color is. Looks like red, blue. Would you agree?
Yes, it looks like red, blue, or violet.
Red, blue.
White.
Oh, yeah, don't confuse me. So one of the things when you're working with this stuff is keeping in mind that these are mirror images of each other. So while that configuration there, we're going to be kind of in the opposite. But next to the yellow is a purple. So then we're going to look through our bundle here. We're going to do our best to kind of untangle and unbraid, because it just makes life miserable later. So I want a purple, and this is going to be our purple in this stuff. And I have a purple next to my yellow. And you can kind of see the way this terminal is set up as to which side needs to go to the upside. I've got a feeling I'm going to need, for this wire, I'm going to need a probe in order to push things in, because the wire itself is not stiff enough to push. Okay, so purple. The next one is a gray.